Madam President, I rise today to continue my tribute to Nebraska's heroes and the current generation of men and women who lost their lives defending our freedom in Iraq and Afghanistan. Each of these Nebraskans has a special story to tell. Throughout this year and beyond, I will continue to honor their memory here on the Senate floor. Today, I wish to highlight the life of Lieutenant Jacob Fritz of Verdun, Nebraska. Jake, as he was known to his friends and loved ones, grew up on his family's farm near Verdun, Nebraska, a town with less than 200 people. While attending Dawson-Verdun High School, Jake thrived and stood out as a model student. He was an all-around athlete and played the baritone in the honor band. He was also passionate about helping others in need, and he regularly devoted his time to organizations that combat substance abuse in Verdun and around the state. Jake's former principal, John Eichhoff, described him as a great kid, student, and athlete. Principal Eichhoff recalls, "If I had a school full of Jacob Fritzes, I wouldn't have had anything to do." When Jake entered his senior year in high school, his focus remained on his commitment to helping others, and he began pursuing a career in the U.S. military. His mother, Nola, recalls Jake's dream of serving his country, which was inspired by his grandfather, a retired Air Force officer. Karen Metzger, a family friend, recalls that Jake wanted to have a career in the Army and more than anything come back to Verdun and live the life of a gentleman farmer. So with the support of his family and a nomination from then Senator Chuck Hagel, Jake left Nebraska in June of 2000 to begin his first year at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. As soon as he arrived, Jake earned the reputation among his fellow cadets as a warm and supportive person. His friend, First Lieutenant Travis Reinfold, recalls Jake's Midwestern values. "I called him Jolly Jake," Lieutenant Reinfold remembers, "because no matter who you were, he always gave you a warm country smile." Lieutenant Reinfold also noted Jake's superb voice as a member of the West Point Glee Club. His voice was always filled with conviction and beauty, particularly when singing the hymn Mansions of the Lord. After 4 years, Jake graduated from West Point with a bachelor's degree in systems engineering. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army on May 28, 2005. Following specialty training, Jake was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 377th Parachute Field Artillery Regiment at Fort Richardson, Alaska. Not long after Jake's arrival at Fort Richardson, the 2nd Battalion was deployed to Iraq. It was 2006, and the war was escalating. The insurgency was in full force and threatening to erase the progress made by American troops. By the end of that year, President Bush announced a counter-assault known as the Surge and deployed an additional 30,000 troops to the region. Lieutenant Fritz joined this effort and routinely volunteered at Forward Operating Base Karbala to assist Iraqi soldiers. Jake had a natural instinct to step up and take charge. He felt an obligation and a commitment to the mission, which often required volunteering for these types of assignments. But shortly after Jake arrived at Karbala, all hell broke loose. On January 20th, 2007, enemy militants disguised as friendly soldiers entered the base and attacked. In a matter of minutes, Lieutenant Fritz and 3 other American soldiers were captured. The militants rushed Jake and the other hostages east towards Mahewal. American troops quickly located their trail and they followed in hot pursuit. Shortly after crossing the Euphrates River and with American forces gaining, the militants attempted to hasten their escape by executing the 4 captives. American soldiers American soldiers were stripped of their identification and shot as the militants fled the scene. And Jake was mortally wounded. As his heartless murderers fled into the abyss, Jake realized his body might not be identified. And so in a final act of bravery, he managed to scrawl a few letters in the dust of an abandoned vehicle. So when the American troops arrived at the scene, they saw his body and the word Fritz. Back in Verdon, Nebraska, it was a snowy day in late January of 2007. Jake's mother, Nola, arrived home to find two strange cars in the driveway. Men dressed in uniform approached her as she walked to the back door. She instinctively knew why they were there, and she refused to listen to the words no mother should ever hear. It was clear that her son would not be coming home. First Lieutenant Jacob Fritz was laid to rest on January 31st, 2007. He received full military honors, and he was buried in the church ceremony just 4 miles from his home. Family and friends, they paid their final respects in a moving service that honored the courage, commitment, and sacrifice of this local hero. Jake was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Prisoner of War Medal, and the Combat Action Badge. His two younger brothers later followed in his footsteps, and they earned commissions in the Army. They serve to this day with the same distinction and the honor that they learned from their big brother. Jake's mother retired from teaching and spends much of her time helping Gold Star families throughout Nebraska. Meanwhile, Jake's memory lives on in the hearts and minds of the state he served. Nebraskans are forever indebted to his sacrifice. First Lieutenant Jacob Fritz is a hero, and I'm honored to tell his story. Thank you, Madam President.